It's been 3 years since Denis Villeneuve's first Dune movie came out. Fortunately, I held off on watching it until it came out on Netflix a few months ago, so it's still pretty fresh in my mind. I wasn't exactly blown away by it. It's a lot more straightforward than David Lynch's version, but not nearly as interesting. Though it's clearly far better than the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries, which was all set on sound stages, so the desert scenes never looked particularly convincing. It was visually spectacular though, so I thought Part 2 would be well worth seeing on the big screen. And sure enough, it's a definite improvement. While the first movie was all about House Harkonnen taking over Arrakis, this is all about Paul and the Fremen taking them down. So it's very much the plucky rebels versus the evil empire. And you can certainly see how Star Wars was inspired by the same book. But this time round there's a lot more variety, as we get to see much more of the wider galaxy, with scenes set on the Emperor's home planet, as well as that of the Harkonnens. The latter is particularly striking, with everything in black and white, everyone's completely bald, and strange creatures lurk in the background with no explanation. It's a definite high point, and successfully conveys some of the weirdness of the books that was somewhat lacking in the first movie. The characters become much more interesting this time round as well, now that they're finally able to take charge of the narrative and not just reacting. Paul was your basic young hero in the first part. Here his role is allowed to become a lot more ambiguous, as his vision showing that continuing on his current path will lead to untold millions of deaths throughout the galaxy. But in the end, events overtake him, so he really doesn't have much choice. Jessica is also much more three-dimensional now, as she becomes a reverend mother and starts to manipulate events for her own ends. Sadly, she doesn't give birth here, but Alia does make her presence felt by telepathically communicating from the womb. And we do get a brief scene of Anya Taylor-Joy playing the adult Alia, which suggests that the next movie is going to have much more of a time jump than the next book did, as there's no way that Anya Taylor-Joy looks 12 years old. As before, the visuals are absolutely stunning, and it's definitely worth seeing on the biggest screen you can, with luscious desert landscapes presented in just about every frame. Sandworms are in it much more than Part 1, where they were barely seen. All the major characters get to ride them at some point, and they're absolutely massive. There are a few space scenes, but sadly all the stuff from the books with the Navigators and the Space Guild doesn't really exist here, which is a shame. But we do get the Emperor's spaceship as a giant mirror ball, which is a beautiful image. Denis Villeneuve is clearly the master at this sort of thing. The relationship between Paul and Shani is portrayed believably enough, though he never mentions that he spent the entire first movie dreaming about her. Women aren't too keen when you tell them that. It's certainly a far more convincing relationship than Anakin and Padme in Attack of the Clones, which was in a similar desert setting. And you do feel for her at the end when he decides to marry Princess Irulan for the good of the universe. That's a difficult conversation. The actors all do a fine job. Timothy Chalamet as Paul is much better than he was first time round. The scene where he finally assumes his prophesied identity and takes control of the Fremen is particularly powerful. Even though all the dialogue is in a made-up language, the intent still comes across. There is an argument that it would have been clearer if everyone had spoken English, but it does add to the authenticity. Zendaya is also really good as Chani. She was barely in the first movie, but here you can definitely see why they cast her. You can tell exactly how she's feeling with just a look. And Javier Bardem as Stilgar is also notable, successfully conveying the journey from skeptic to fervent believer. And on the evil side, Austin Butler as Fade Rother gives an incredible performance. He's absolutely feral, but magnetic to watch, and I suspect he's going to win a lot of awards. Overall, it's an epic movie, visually stunning, and telling a great story. Or rather, the best half of a great story. Perhaps it's a bit too dry and lacking in humour, but then the same could be said of the source material. And it's good that not every big movie has to be full of non-stop quips, like these Star Wars and Marvel movies are. I will definitely be looking forward to all of Denis Villeneuve's future movies, not least of which will be Dune Messiah. And I'll try to reread the books before that one comes out, so I'll be more up to speed with the differences between the different versions. Thanks for watching. My next movie review should be the new Ghostbusters movie, but I'm not 100% sure I'll be going to see it. I wasn't too keen on the last one, so I might wait for some of the early reviews to see if it's an improvement. Anyway, hit the subscribe button if you like, and I'll see you next time.